Our guest today is Buddy Nielsen from Senses Fail. We're going to talk to him about a lot of stuff, including his workshops that he'll be doing this summer with the Entertainment Institute. The way this works is that you, as we like to say, you type, we ask. So if you look over on the right-hand side of this page, there's a little area where you can type in a question. I will choose the best of those and ask them to Buddy. So Buddy and I will chat for a little bit and allow some of those questions to come in. I guess to start with, Buddy, what are you working on right now aside from getting ready to hit the road? Or is that it?
You know, not much. I'm not really doing any new projects. Been doing been writing a lot, just like actual, like stories and op-eds, and that's really it. I mean, creatively, I haven't really jumped into the next project just because I've been so focused on the record and the touring that we have coming up.
Yeah, well, you do have a record that we should plug. Do you want to kind of tell everyone the details on that?
Comes out June 30th. I think it's pretty awesome because it's by far the most adventurous sort of musical exploration we've ever done. From a musical standpoint, it's completely different than anything we've ever done. We really pushed ourselves to go somewhere different. And lyrically, I think it's the most raw and honest I've ever been able to be, and stirringly emotional.
Yeah, well, it seems like you're definitely in a, I guess let's maybe say you're in a different place in your life now than you have been in the past, from what I can tell, and the new record's probably going to reflect that.
Yeah, it does. It's kind of what this record discusses, this sort of transition from who I was to who I am, which kind of every record is like that for me. But specifically this one, there was a large change for me. So,
cool. Well,
yeah.
June 30th, everybody will get a chance to hear that for themselves. In the meantime, let's talk about what you're doing with the Entertainment Institute. So for anybody who is not familiar with the Entertainment Institute, it is a new company that is started by some good friends of ours, Matt Halpern from Periphery, Kevin Lyman, who is founder of Warped Tour and an icon, obviously, and Jen Kellogg, who's one of the behind-the-scenes people at Warped Tour, has been on CreativeLive. She's also awesome. So they're going to be working with people like Buddy, with Matt from August Burns Red, Miss May I, a bunch of other artists, to teach classes on kind of all different facets of music industry, live in person and Warped Tour. Can you give everybody a little bit of a preview of what will be what you'll be focusing on in your workshops?
You know, I'm going to mix a little bit about sort of the life-changing things that have been imparted to me from some of my recent teachers, in with how that's affected the way I look at the music business and staying relevant. So it's kind of like a, you know, how to enjoy life, be present, and also be successful, because sometimes it's sort of difficult to do all of it. Like, how do you maintain a level of ethics while still trying to be successful? And where is that line? And when does it make sense to focus on success, and when does it make sense to focus on your own being? It's going to be, I really want that's the guideline, but you know, people are going to show up and help dictate which way we go. You know, some days we might talk mostly about creativity and being authentic, and, you know, how do you be in a band for 13 years and how do you stay successful? And then the other thing we might talk about, how do you deal with anxiety? You know, what's been my experience with coming out? So I'm really going to kind of do it down the middle. I'll talk a little bit about each, and then the class can really decide for itself. Do we want to make it more about music business, or do we want to make it more personal, or do we want to make it about lyric writing? How do you put yourself into your music without being too revealing, and what's that line, and just how do you even describe how you're feeling? You have to first know how you're feeling. So that's also a really important thing too. I mean, what is going on in your body? You know, a little bit of, not a lot of meditation stuff, but I think there'll be a little bit of, just a little brief sort of introduction into meditation and how that sort of has shaped the way in which I've made music.
Well, it seems to me like in the past couple years, you know, people have really started to look to you as someone who is, I guess it sounds like a corny thing to say, but you know, people are looking at you as kind of like an inspirational figure, as a role model, as somebody to ask these questions to, which I think is awesome. And I think it's cool that you're kind of taking this opportunity to give back and help some kids that were probably like us that wish they had somebody they could have asked these questions to when we were 13 or 16 years old.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to, I'm willing to do that. You know, I think that that's something I didn't have. So if I could help do that for someone else, it would be a wonderful thing. I'm willing, and, you know, really trying to do things to learn about how to do that. You know, I've done a couple different actual workshops on varying different, specifically like nonviolent communication, sort of bringing people together, deep listening practices. So, you know, I'm going to do something of a diversity training when I get back from Warped Tour. So I'm actually really trying to cultivate a set of tools to be able to do that.
Yeah, well, we've got some viewer questions coming in, and I want to get to those in 1 second. But the thing I'm curious about is, you know, sometimes people ask me advice on some of the same kind of things that they probably ask you about. And sometimes it's a little bit scary because I feel a real sense of responsibility to give them good guidance. And I'm just a guy, and I don't always, you know, like, well, I'm glad you're, you know, it's cool that you're coming to me, but it's a little bit intimidating at times. Is that something that you ever think about?
I mean, I just had an experience. We just did this sort of LGBT community building, meditation, council type thing. And yeah, it was really heavy to hear people share their story about what it's like to live, what it's been like to live for them as identifying somewhere on the spectrum. And it's heavy, but I also think you don't always have to give some answer. I've learned that from my teachers. Like, sometimes it's okay to say, I don't know, and but I'm willing to listen to you, because there's, you know, so many experiences in life that are different from ours. So we can relate in some way, but maybe not specifically. So just kind of holding a space for people to share and be listened to is almost better than even giving advice. Because a lot of times I think in our culture, we're really quick to try to fix. Mm-hmm. You know, like, oh, you're having a problem, let me fix it for you. But really, not everybody's looking for that. A lot of times I think people are maybe just looking to be heard. And I think you can sort of it's difficult. You have to pick and choose when you can really give good information versus information you're just giving to provide something, when really it's like, hey, I don't know the answer. That's a really tough question, because giving an answer that you're not 100% on is also, that can just leave you sort of in a weird position, like you were saying, for, man, did I really give that person the right advice, or did I just give them some advice just so I could give them something? Because if it looked like they needed it, I think sometimes I have an answer to that. You know, there is no answer to that. The only thing you can do is navigate it on your own, and know that you have some support. So I think that that's like a totally another way to look at it that I've sort of been introduced to.
Well, let's start off with a question from Kelsey that kind of touches on a little of the music stuff, a little bit of the personal stuff. Hi, Buddy. Fell in love with Census Fail when Let It Unfold You came out. Firstly, I want to say thank you for your support of the queer, particularly trans community. You're an awesome ally to have. Now that you're identifying as queer, do you look back at some of your earlier music from that period and see where you might have been writing about your struggle with identity and sexuality?
Yeah, thank you so much. That's a really good question. Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I knew back then I was writing songs about it. I just wasn't willing to really go into it, really. And there are specific songs in our catalog that I can point to and go, oh, that song is about exactly this experience of being sort of closeted or not being able to really talk about it. So yeah, it's really interesting. And you know, there's not any like specific like, oh, I was talking about a guy in this song, or you know, nothing like specific like that. But there are songs that I write about that sort of despair of not being able to share who I was, which I sort of had to impart to just overall depression rather than really giving it a name like I do on this record, which is more just like, no, I couldn't really be who I was because I didn't feel safe or comfortable. And that's why this song is so heavy and I'm fucking screaming and I'm angry because I had to be closeted for so long. And that's also why this record's so heavy, because I'm not talking about, you know, teenage angst shit. This is much bigger and deeper. And a lot of our band, I think, I always had this deep sort of darkness, but I was only able to ever really scratch the surface. So a lot of the older music can be imparted to teen angst, but it was much deeper than that. But I just couldn't really go there. So yeah, I mean, I would say a lot of our catalog is about this.
Yeah, it's interesting. As we get older, you know, you kind of you can let go of the little stuff that when you were a teenager might have bothered you, and so on the one hand you're like, well, it's cool. I don't, you know, that stuff rolls off my back easily now. On the other hand, you're like, on the other hand, I've got this really big important shit I got to deal with. It's way harder to deal with. I kind of wish I was just dealing with the teen angst again.
Yeah.
Another question is, can you talk a bit about what changes you've seen in the industry since starting Census Fail, and what's enabled you to sustain your career?
Well, I mean, everything has changed. I mean, I really can't, I mean, I don't even know where to begin with that. The whole business structure of the entire music industry, and I've been through sort of the last golden age of being able to sell music for profit to sort of the beginning of using the internet to promote your band to this sort of, I would call intermediate period where we've sort of figured out the internet, but everyone's got a different idea of how to use it, and there's no real cohesive way to go about promoting your music. And really even, there's no real cohesive way to, other than playing music, other than playing live, cohesive way to really make money off selling music anymore. So it's been really interesting. I mean, I would say the reason why we've been able to continue to be successful is because we've been able to continue to be relevant. And the ways in which we've continued to be relevant, I think, is by being honest about who we are, and also having an interest in the music scene. Like, I'm deeply interested and listen to new music. So I know what's going on the ground level because I still actively participate in the hardcore scene, in the punk scene, in going to shows and listening to new music and supporting bands. So I think when older bands don't do that, you really have a hard time of you feel disconnected from what's happening. And I think over a period of time, you lose touch. And then when it comes time to really try to like reinvent yourself, because you have to reinvent yourself multiple times in your career, or else you're going to become kind of like a, you know, archaic sort of
frozen in time.
Yeah.
I always think it's funny when people say, you know, hardcore is dead, you know, which always corresponds to the time in which they stopped paying attention to it. I'm like, really? Because on Sunday I went to a DIY show at a coffee shop and there were a bunch of bands playing and it seemed like the same thing as when I was 18. It seemed pretty alive to me.
Yeah, it's true. So I think that you also have to, as a band, you take a risk. You have to take a risk at some point to say, look, we can't keep making the music we're going to make because it's outdated. You know, if we were making the same music we did in 2002, it would sound outdated. People wouldn't be drawn towards it. And then you run into the risk of, like, yes, you're making your old fans happy, but you also have to make new fans. And to make new fans, you need to sort of be involved in what is current. And if you're not involved in what is current, younger people are going to be like, well, that's old. That's for older people. And so it's a balance about taking a risk, being relevant, while also still appeasing and respecting the people that have supported you for so long. And that's why we bounce between, doing a 10-year tour for one of our records, and then we're going to do Warped Tour. It's like really trying to spread ourselves out.
I think it's really interesting how much the band now is kind of like embracing hardcore in a way. Like when the band started, I didn't know that much about the band at the time, but I would have never really guessed that you guys had the roots that you do in the hardcore scene. And those are much more apparent now, which I think is really cool. Can you talk about kind of where that came from and why you're embracing that so much now?
I mean, I always have been into hardcore and loved hardcore. My influence for starting Senses Fail was really out of my love for heavy music. What I really wanted to do was to mix Saves the Day and Thursday. I love screamo. I love like Scramsy type music. I was really into like Page 99 and Orchid and Seisha. So I wanted to mix that with like Saves the Day, because those were my two big influences from New Jersey at the time of when I really started the band. But so that just took off, and Senses Fail kind of became this own thing. And when we first started, we didn't. Everybody played together. It was really weird. You didn't really define, like, in the local scene, this like sort of Scramsy band playing with this pop punk band playing with this emo core band. It was just everybody just played together. So you really didn't. I don't know. At least I didn't really. Separate it. It was just like, this is the New Jersey scene. Everybody kind of plays together.
I remember seeing Discordance Access with Doc Hopper, for example.
Yeah, like AFI played with this band called The Assistant one time, and it's just like, that didn't make any sense, but it's just like, this is what was happening. And I've always loved hardcore. I've always loved hardcore because of the aggression and of the ethics in it, because it's still, and has always been really important to have ethics in your music. And I also just love the music. I love everything about hardcore. I mean, the only thing that I would say that I would want more out of hardcore is more inclusivity. And that's really it. But everything else I've always respected and loved. And it was just,
don't you think that's changing though?
I do. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's happening
like pretty
right
quickly,
now.
I think.
Yes. Yeah. Whereas when I was involved, I was kind of scared to go to hardcore shows. That really wasn't why I was drawn to it. I didn't feel safe being in a hardcore band back when I first started going to shows, because they were like literally dangerous. They weren't like, like, oh yeah, you go see a band in the pit is, violent. No, it was like the show is violent, and there's like violent people at the show, and there's like skinheads and crews, and I'm sitting here being this non-straight dude, and I'm just like, yeah, I love this music, but it's really difficult for me to like want to be a part of it because I just didn't feel like I had a spot, you know?
Right.
Whereas like I got way to like propaganda and stuff like that because I was like, oh, these guys, you know, this fits with me. But then Senseless Fail just kind of took off, and it was like, well, it's popular, and I like playing this music. I'm not going to try to make this a hardcore band because also I'm 1/5 of the band, so I could only ever impart my direction, you know, to 1/5.
Yeah.
Now I'm the only member that's technically in the band, so it's really been my vision for where the band could go. And when that happened, I was like, well, I want to take the band in a hardcore direction because I like hardcore, and that's the kind of music I want to play, and I want the ethics to be important and the politics to be important, and I want to change what Senseless Fail is for its second decade.
Well, I want to get to another viewer question, which I think is a good one, and something that, you know, I struggle with a lot is, you know, I feel, you know, look back at years I spent in the past, you know, especially like in hardcore, and go, God, what was I doing? Well, you know, did I waste all these years? Rah, rah, rah. I have a hard time letting go of the past, which is kind of where this is coming from. I've experienced a lot of depression, anxiety in the past, taken up medication and exercise to address it. If you could offer the greatest piece of advice, what is the best way to move on from the past and live the way that you want to in the future?
Some of the best advice that was given to me, it's also part of you know, meditation practice that I have, is that you don't have to believe everything that your mind puts in front of you. That our minds are conditional. So everything that's happening to you is based on the existence of something else. So there's this impersonal sort of nature to your thoughts. And when you can start to like put some distance between who you are and the thought you're having, you start to get this freedom because you no longer feel knocked around by your thoughts, by your life. Because I too would have a mind, just like everybody else, just constantly comparing, constantly planning, constantly judging, you know, and the nature of your mind is to do that, is to do these things. That's one of the functions of the mind. For me, when I started to meditate, I started to be able to see that I can observe these things without being involved in them. So when depression, when anger, when sadness come up, instead of putting it on like a jacket and going, I am sad, I am angry, I am depressed, I am anxious, I am longing for the past, I can stop and go, oh, depression is arising, anger is arising. What does that feel like when it's in my system? And you start to like really have this different relationship to your mind when you can sort of let go of, because what would happen to me is I'd make a judgment. I'd judge someone I'd love, I'd judge something I like, and out of that judgment would pop up this voice that judged the judgment. And I'm sure a lot of people had that happen. And then you have this cycle of it's called the second era. Because we already have life, which is difficult, you know. Everybody knows that. Even if you have a perfect life, people you love are going to die. You're not going to get everything you want. Things aren't always going to go the way you want. And sometimes the things you love will get taken away. And then we have all this other suffering that is self-induced almost. Like, so when our minds, because we've been conditioned to dislike something, like I really dislike when it's hot. So then I would be like, why am I freaking out? Why can't I just calm down? Like, it's hot. Like, why can't I just be like everybody else? And there's this other level, like I'm already feeling this discomfort for it being too warm. And then I have this judgment and start beating myself up. So when you start to like wake up to the process of how you really just start pounding on yourself, you can go, oh my God, and release this level of like judgment. And then when you can see clearly like, oh, I'm thinking about the past and planning for the future, you're missing out on what's happening in the moment. And what I do a lot of times is I just bring myself back to the present. Mm-hmm. Over and over again. It's not something that you just do once. It's something that I do hundreds of times a day.
A conscious effort.
It's really about training your mind to really not wander away, because when we leave it to its own devices, it goes and thinks about our ex-girlfriend. It thinks about how we change that.
It goes all kinds of bad places. None of them are good. It goes lots of places and they're all bad.
Yeah, they're all bad.
At least for me.
Yeah, and that's why coming to really watch that process allows you some freedom to go, okay, well, you can go over there, but I'm going to stay here. So if you want to go think about the time in high school that I, should have done this and I would have had a better life, like, you can go do that, but I'm going to stay here because right now I'm here. And that's the only place I can be. And the future is unpredictable. And it takes a lot of effort, but that's been my experience. I mean, this is my experience with life, is not being able to be present with what is. So I understand this question, and that's why the answer is so long, because it's very personal to me.
Well, I have time for one more viewer question, which I'm going to get to in 1 second, but I wanted to, before we do that, so I don't forget, tell you something that you said on Ray's podcast. So our mutual friend Ray Harkins has a podcast called 100 Words or Less, which Buddy was on maybe, I don't know what, 3 or 4 months ago or something like that. Talked about a lot of good stuff. You should definitely check it out. The thing that really hit me really hard that you said that I totally identified with, that made me kind of realize something about myself, was that you said, just based on how you grew up and stuff, that your default view of the world is that something really bad is going to happen unless you like really actively prevent it. And that really resonated with me. And since you said that, I've been, kind of getting back to what you were saying, noticing my brain going to that place. I'm noticing like, oh, my brain is convinced that something bad is going to happen. But is it really? Like, probably not. And so I just take a step back and go, okay, I'm going to stop acting out of fear and just act, stay in the moment and not be afraid of lightning striking, because there's no reason to think that lightning is going to strike.
Yeah, I mean.
So thank you for that. Good. That was really helpful. The last question that I want to ask from the viewers, kind of got a bunch of questions, which, is a big one, is about coming out. So kind of 2 questions there. Variations on these 2 questions is what made you decide to come out, and what advice would you have for somebody who is thinking about coming out, especially, maybe the Warped Tour kind of audience that's younger and scared of what their family and friends and kids at school are going to think?
What made me come out was that I just, once I really didn't even investigate, and I didn't know that the way in which my sexuality works fit anywhere. And that's also, I think, a big thing about why I hadn't come out sooner. 2 reasons. 1, I didn't feel comfortable, and 2, I didn't really know where I fit, because I didn't fully feel exclusively gay and exclusively straight, and I didn't feel bi, because I didn't have like this equal sort of go both ways type thing. I mean, my sexuality was much more like, I'm physically attracted to this, but emotionally I'm attracted to this, and they're opposites, and then sometimes. So it's like very fluid. And I didn't know that the fluidity in sexuality really existed until really soon. So one of the main reasons why I came out was to sort of educate people on this fluidity that we have in our sexuality. And that's probably been the toughest thing about coming out, is that, nobody wants another thing to digest, And I understand that. I mean, I understand that people feel like they're overwhelmed enough as it is with trying to be politically correct and trying to take all this information in on what is going on in the world. But on one hand, I have like an understanding of that. On the other hand, I don't care. This is what you need to accept, and you need to be educated on it. So I think you can have like this compassion for somebody experiencing that, but then you also have to be like, look, and I'm here and I exist, and this is the truth about me and thousands, maybe millions of other people. So I really wanted to come out because I never really had anyone in my life that I could look to and go, well, yeah, that person kind of represents me at all. You know, and just in general, there's not much LGBTQ presence in the underground sort of music scene. You know, there's some people, but also, it's not everybody needs to be an advocate. And that's something that I really like. Just because you identify doesn't mean you need to
be a spokesperson.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that was also something that I didn't realize too. It's like, why aren't all these people doing it? Because it's fucking hard. You know, it's like when you open yourself up to start teaching people about this, you have to get it from both sides. You get the shut the fuck up, we don't want to hear it, and then you get the people who are on your side but don't think you're doing a good enough job. So I totally understand it, and the reason why I came out was, one, so I could be completely honest with myself, but then also to represent something that I didn't feel was really represented within this music scene or within anywhere in my life. So an advice to how to do it, I mean, I was really lucky. I mean, I have a really supportive family. Well, you know what? It was very supportive, but it was still difficult. You know, I don't think it's ever going to be easy to do that and to explain it. I mean, because for me, I had to explain that I wasn't gay, and that was like this whole long sort of like, well, I'm not gay, but I've done this, and it's just like, you're just like, you know, like your parents were like, wait a minute.
Pick one.
Yeah, I don't get. So wait, are you gonna break up with your fiance now, or like?
We don't care which one you are. Just pick one.
You know, my dad was like, "What are you? You sleep with animals?" I'm like, "What are you, fucking idiot?" Like, nah. You know, that really pissed me off. That really bothered me. But yeah, it was difficult. It was really difficult. And the one thing that I could say is I had support of other people that had done it before me, that I could speak to and they could understand. So really making sure that there is a foundation to turn to. And unfortunately, a lot of us don't have that, whether we're straight or queer. The Trevor Project is a really good place to turn because they have people that specifically can deal with and understand what it means to come out and to deal with the depression, to deal with the anxiety, to deal with it. Also, the It Gets Better campaign is another place.
So what was the one you said, the Trevor Project?
Yeah, the Trevor Project.
And where can people find that?
Let me just double check. I think it's trevorproject.com.
Okay, so Google Trevor Project if you're interested.
It's more, it's a suicide hotline, but I know that they'd be able to sort of assist in sort of like, hey, I mean, as shitty as it sounds, I think a lot of people that, you know, have identified at some point have thought about suicide. So even if it's not an extremely relevant thing for you, it's still a place where there'll be voices that can support you. Okay. Then the other thing is why can I say that? It Gets Better campaign. I believe, let me just double check that. Yeah, the It Gets Better campaign, I think, is another organization that can help and provide some support. But the reason why I said Trevor Project is because you can call at any time, you can go online, and there'll be someone to talk to. You know, you don't have to be in a suicidal moment to reach out. I think sometimes people feel like, wow, I'm not there, so I can't reach out to this. But I think anybody would be willing to sort of support you. Hey, I'm thinking about coming out. I'm worried. I don't know, what has your experience been like? Because everybody that works there identifies and has been through some level of this experience.
All right, well, I wish that I could talk about this with you all day because it's awesome. But in the meantime, I guess people should go to thinktei.com to sign up for your Warped Tour classes if they want to talk about it more with you and with other people who might be able to help them. And thanks for doing this. Thank you for doing everything else that you do. I think you're really helping a lot more people than you realize. I appreciate it. I'm sure they do too. And hopefully we'll see you on Warped.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Take care.
Bye.